Not too long ago, a guy called Casey Neistat, who is a famous YouTube vlogger and a guy who features a face that looks like this, was walking through Brooklyn, New York when he discovered a crack in the sidewalk, weirdly decided to stick his camera in said crack, and discovered what appeared to be a critical infrastructure failure. Now, I have no idea what the end result of that Casey Neistat video was, but what I do know is that these cracks in the foundation that is the city of New York go far beyond Casey Neistat in Brooklyn. Recently, there was a story about a crack that people thought was no big deal in Hell's Kitchen around 51st Street near a parking lot, but then upon further investigation, not only did this crack reveal that the subway track, the Amtrak, was beneath it, but that there was critical danger in this particular part of New York, not only for people on the surface, but for people riding the train. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because our cities are falling apart, our infrastructure is absolutely collapsing, and it is moments like this that are really reflective of the poor management of our major cities by political parties, and in particular, the Democratic Party. But before we get into that, this video is sponsored, so let me toss it to the sponsor, then we'll come back over here and talk about it on the other side. If you're anything like me, then you know that poor sleep can negatively impact your mental health. In fact, studies show consistently that getting less than 6 hours of sleep a night can reduce your white blood cell count, can cause weight gain, mood swings, all kinds of issues. And I personally have struggled with this my entire life. This is one of the reasons why I'm so happy to be partnering with Beam Dream. Their line of healthy hot cocos in wonderful seasonal flavors really hits the spot and can help you get to sleep in the evening. I put one of these in a cup of steamed milk every single evening, and then I'm off to sleep and I don't wake up as much. And better yet, when I actually do wake up the next day, I feel more refreshed and not like I've taken anything unusual. This sugar-free cocoa has a combination of killer ingredients like reishi, melatonin, and nano CBD in order to help you get to sleep. With amazing seasonal flavors like cinnamon cocoa, salted caramel, white chocolate peppermint, and this chocolate peanut butter, which I am so excited to try. And for you guys out there in my audience, if you go to shopbeam.com/justicewarrior, you get access to their biggest sale of the year. 50% off Beam Dream. Get your cocoa. It's absolutely amazing. That is shopbeam.com/justicewarrior. Get better sleep starting tonight.
Tonight we're going to dig deeper into what happened to Amtrak that would bring to a halt the busy line between Penn Station to Albany. It turns out had nothing to do with the train itself. Instead, the problem? Cracks in a parking garage on Manhattan's west side, like that crack. Below the garage, the tracks of Amtrak. Above the garage, apartments where New Yorkers live.
Now on its surface, get it? On the surface, because it's a crack in the sidewalk on the surface, this photo from a distance doesn't look all that bad. But the thing is, as you can see, there's actually train tracks visible, and this of course is that Amtrak train that goes up to Albany, our state's capital, that had to be shut down due to the fact that this crack was indicative of serious structural failures in the train lines in the city of New York, in Hell's Kitchen, which not only is the area being controlled and policed by one daredevil, but apparently is about to sink into the earth, into the abyss, into hell itself, due to the fact that it is so poorly maintained.
Well, Bill, this parking garage in Hell's Kitchen is about 20 blocks from Penn Station, but the problems here are causing headaches all the way from Penn to Albany. You don't need to be an engineer to know this isn't good. You can literally see the Amtrak train tracks through the floor of a parking garage. Obvious to customers, something isn't right.
You know, the local news guy says you don't have to be an engineer to know that this isn't good, but here's the thing. Maybe you do have to be an engineer to know that it isn't good. I mean, I hate to be a contrarian, but I would assume if the subway lines are underground, then an ordinary crack in the sidewalk could potentially reveal that subway line, and that wouldn't necessarily mean that everybody above and below is in danger. Maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm a nut job, whack job conspiracy theorist, but I think you probably do have to be an engineer to understand whether or not this is a serious crack that is life-threatening, that all the cars could be sucked into the train line, killing absolutely everyone, or if this is no big deal, something that you could pour concrete over and it would be a-okay, first class all the way. I don't know, I'm not a doctor, I've never researched and diagnosed a sidewalk in my entire life, but I do think that maybe being an engineer probably is required to know whether or not this is a deadly serious problem, which is why initially they didn't really suspend the train lines, but then when the engineers looked at it, they were like, holy crap, it's all about a collapse, the city's falling apart, and then that's when they took the more dramatic action. I don't know, maybe I'm just being contrarian for no reason.
It was on Friday, and I had seen two guys looking through a crack, so that's how I knew something was. The crack is literally like as soon as you drive in, you could see the crack through the pavement. And I saw a guy with a flashlight looking down.
In fact, it's one of 2 holes Department of Buildings inspectors found at the Hudson View Garage on 51st Street between 10th and 11th Avenues.
So this is where stuff actually gets serious, in my humble opinion, because it's one thing to be like, hole in the ground, stick your camera in there, you could see a train line, isn't that crazy? But the fact of the matter is, even though there is a hole inside the parking structure, this one is right at the entrance, the precipice, where each and every car every single day ends up passing through. And when you think about how that thin line of concrete is what separates these vehicles that often weigh thousands of pounds from crashing into the Amtrak line, you realize what an absolute disaster this actually is. Also, it's on 51st Street, so there's a lot of human traffic, there are a lot of apartment buildings around there, there's a lot of businesses around there, and all of that is putting pressure. And to think that the city of New York, a huge portion of it, even if it is being protected by Daredevil, is being held up in large part by this thin of a layer of concrete with a crack in it, has to be very worrisome for residents in the city of New York.
While installing overhead protection above the tracks early Sunday morning, DOB and Amtrak engineers found additional structural issues at the roof of the tunnel below the parking garage and structural defects, including cracked and deteriorated beams. They found a second hole on the ramp to the lower level, 2 inches by 5. The first one was found in the entrance ramp of the parking garage, 6 inches by 10. As a result, DOB issued a vacate order. The garage, by the way, has a high-rise apartment building sitting right on top of it.
So yeah, this is why you actually have the engineers come and take a look at it, and one of the things that they ended up discovering, as reported by Sifan Kim from the local news, is the fact that there was cracks in the steel, additional holes, all kinds of problems. And as I said, there is an additional apartment building, a high-rise right above this, all putting downward pressure, making this cleanup, this repair job, an absolute nightmare for city workers, and by the way, federal workers as well, because this particular line actually is an Amtrak line. Now, of course, one of the things that you have to ask yourself is how things got this bad. Why did our infrastructure start crumbling to this extent? And the answer to this question is that it is being run by the government. As you guys well know, and I've talked about on this channel a bunch of different times, the government is not interested in maintenance because you can't do a ribbon cutting ceremony in front of maintenance. You can't do that when it comes to rewiring the subway. That's why the subway track system is 100 years old. There's more duct tape in there than actual new wire. The signaling system, again, because you can't do a ribbon cutting ceremony in front of it, is still hundreds of years old in the New York City subway. We have no idea where the trains are on the tracks, and we still use a very unsophisticated system of lights on the train. If you guys will remember, there was a viral video of somebody trying to pull a homeless person off the train track, and a lot of stupid people thought that the police weren't doing anything, they weren't helping, because the one cop that was there kept flashing his flashlight inside the subway tunnel. Well, the reason they were doing that is because there is no automated way to warn the train operator that there's somebody on the track, and the way that you would do it is by signaling them with a flashlight. So what that cop was doing in that particular scenario was preventing the oncoming train from crushing everybody because of our outdated signaling system. This is not how they do trains in Europe. This is not how they do trains in Japan, but this is the standard, the poor standard in the city of New York. And when you have that little care for updating and maintenance, you end up in situations like this.
DOB inspectors have determined determined that none of the neighboring buildings are affected. Meanwhile, the issue is causing a major Amtrak suspension.
Now, as of right now, the building inspector is reporting that all of the buildings, including the building that is on top of the parking lot, are perfectly safe, no big deal, no need to vacate. Everything is a-okay, first class all the way. But the thing is, the cars cannot be removed from the parking lot because that is considered too dangerous and potentially deadly for the train or for the vehicles, because there is obviously a belief with the unstable, brittle steel beams that are withering away that a collapse could be potentially imminent. Yet we're being told that all of the residents in the high-rise just above that shouldn't worry and there's nothing to see here, yada yada, no big deal. And I just want to point out the absolute complete hypocrisy as we're seeing it on display when it comes to the city of New York. Because whenever something happens in a red state, whenever a building collapses or anything like that, we're told that this is due to the fact that Republicans, they deregulate us. Republicans, they don't care about safety, and their lack of concern about safety costs people's lives. But the thing is, New York has one of the most regulated real estate markets on planet Earth. New York City parking garages are regulated beyond all belief, and yet this has been allowed to happen, this has been allowed to occur, and if not for people pointing out that it's kind of weird that you could see inside the Metro North line from this parking lot, nobody would have noticed this until a disaster would have struck. All of the government regulators, all of the rules, all the building inspectors, code enforcers, the people who work in the subway and all their regulators, none of them saw this coming, none of them predicted this, and we are on the verge of an imminent collapse into this tunnel, which would be dozens of feet below, as you could see by the photos, and yet nothing was done until random everyday citizens noticed that there was a problem. This is the state of American critical infrastructure, and when you could point to the boogeyman of deregulation, then the media focuses on it. However, when you have an overregulated market where absolutely everything's controlled and the same exact failures occur over and over again, then all of a sudden it's like, nothing could have prevented this obvious problem that could have been prevented by maintenance.
As for the garage, it has been closed since Friday for emergency repairs, leaving customers frustrated.
I actually called the Hudson Garage this morning, and they did get back to me, but they said they had no information. And, they recently charged my credit card again, and I asked them if they're going to refund that back, and they said they don't have any information to give me.
Now, of course, the parking garage is forced to be closed. Nobody can get their cars out of it. And because it's New York City, because we have these kind of scummy business practices, they're actually charging people's credit cards over and over again for the stay, even though they're preventing them from getting their vehicles out. And by the way, to my point about critical infrastructure and these kind of collapses and all that, I will say it's actually happened in the city of New York before, in downtown Manhattan, where one of these parking garages have collapsed. You didn't hear about it, you didn't get it nationally reported to you because it wasn't an infrastructure failure in a red state. So these things happen all of the time, they're ever more frequent, and no matter how many politicians come forward with all of these critical infrastructure bills that are about putting solar panels in the ocean so that we could supercharge our salmon population down there, it doesn't seem to ever improve the ordinary everyday maintenance that a sensible system would be focused on, rather than these glamorous projects that you get to name after people.
Now, a spokesperson for the garage says it leases the garage from the owner and referred us to the owner for these questions. As for the cars inside, they say the earliest these cars can be removed is this Saturday.
Yeah, I hate the city of New York sometimes. I really do. You have the people in the parking garage saying, listen. We're just leasing the garage from the owner. You got to talk to the owner about the issue of people being double charged for their cars that they can't get out, because that's really an issue for the owner, not an issue for us. And if you are stuck, you live in New Jersey, and this is where you park when you commute into the city, I guess you got to pound sand or, stomp around, but don't stomp too hard, because who knows, you could be collapsing and falling to your death if you did so, due to the fact that the ordinary maintenance and upkeep of our subway system, the so-called arteries of New York City, are not actually being upkept. Now look, you better get used to these kind of crumbling infrastructure stories, and I know you'll hear about them when they're in red states, when they're in the charge of red governors who push deregulation, but it's all over this country. I got news for you. There are decades of non-repair, non-maintenance that have gone on, and every time you hear about an infrastructure bill and you think these problems are being resolved, make sure you keep it in the back of your mind that they actually are never being resolved. Everything in our cities, spoiler alert, is essentially paper mache at this point in time, and it's only a matter of time before something like this happens near you if it hasn't happened already. It's only a matter of time before an entire high-rise apartment actually does end up in the subway system in the city of New York, because that's how bad things have actually gotten. They're stealing from your highway funds, they're stealing from your infrastructure funds, because you don't notice today, you don't notice in the next few years once the maintenance isn't being done, but long term it's absolutely disastrous, and when that bridge collapses, they'll find the closest politician in order to blame for this, not even acknowledging the fact that all these other predecessors are the ones who started the process of looting the treasury. But hey, those are just my thoughts. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about New York City literally collapsing. Till next time.